Today, we're looking at a really pivotal and frankly kind of bizarre moment in American history, the presidential election of 1824.
Yeah,
This wasn't just, another election. It felt more like a political detonation, really shook up the early republic.
absolutely. And to really get 1824, you sort of have to picture the U.S. at that time. The country was expanding, stretching its legs geographically. The economy was picking up steam.
Right, the War of 1812 was over, but new things were happening, like the Erie Canal, changing trade and travel, big time.
Huge. And you had these growing differences, too. The cotton boom in the South, deepening the reliance on enslaved labor, which was a really stark contrast to the industries starting up in the North. So these tensions were definitely building under the surface.
And the politics mirrored that, didn't it? The Federalist Party was, well, basically gone. So you just had the Democratic Republicans. Looked like unity on the surface.
Looked like it, yeah. But that unity was, let's say, fragile, paper thin. And the 1824 election, that's when the ice cracked wide open, showed just how fractured things were internally.
Okay, so who are the main players in this? Because it wasn't just two main candidates.
No, not at all. That's what makes it so unusual. You had four major contenders, all technically from that same party, Democratic Republicans.
Four from one party. Wow.
Yeah, but they represented really different factions, different visions for the country.
All right, let's break them down. First, John Quincy Adams.
Right, John Quincy Adams,
All right.
son of the second president, John Adams. Highly experienced diplomat, Secretary of State at the time. He represented New England interests, really pushed for the federal government to invest in infrastructure, education, that sort of thing.
Statesman type,
Yeah,
maybe a little academic.
Perceived that way, yeah. Then you had Andrew Jackson, very different vibe.
The hero of New Orleans.
Exactly. Immense popularity, huge support, especially in the South and the West. He was positioned as the man of the people.
The frontier democracy symbol. A bit rough around the edges, maybe.
That was part of the image, yeah. Then number 3, Henry Clay.
Ah, the great compromiser from Kentucky. Speaker of the House.
Powerful position. And he championed his American system.
That was about tariffs, a national bank, and those internal improvements, right? Roads, canals.
Precisely. He wanted to use federal power to kind of knit the country's economy together.
Okay, and the fourth?
William H. Crawford, Secretary of the Treasury. He had the backing of sort of the older Southern political establishment.
But he had health issues during the campaign.
Yes, that's a crucial point. He suffered a pretty serious stroke. It limited him quite a bit, but he stayed in the race.
So 4 distinct figures. And the campaign itself, it wasn't like today, was it? No primaries, no clear party platforms even.
Not at all. It sounds much more like just a political brawl. Fought out in newspapers, state legislatures backing certain guys, lots of private meetings.
Or a free-for-all, really.
Pretty much. So with these different personalities, this kind of messy playing field, what were the actual issues driving things, besides just who you liked?
Well, those internal improvements were definitely a big one. Roads, canals, infrastructure.
Who stood where on that?
Well, Clay and Adams were strongly for federal investment. They saw it as essential for, progress and unity.
Okay.
Jackson was a bit more vague, probably trying to appeal broadly. Crawford leaned more towards states' rights, letting the states handle it.
Got it. And tariffs. That old chestnut.
Oh, yeah. Already a source of tension. The North, with its growing industries, generally liked tariffs to protect them from foreign goods.
But the South.
The agricultural South hated them, saw them as just driving up the cost of things they needed to buy. You can already see the economic friction building there.
Definitely. But it feels like beyond policy, personality was just huge in this election, maybe even more than usual.
I think so. Jackson leaned heavily on the war hero image, the decisive leader. Adams pointed to his diplomatic record, his intellect. Clay positioned himself as the unifier, the experienced deal maker. Crawford relied more on his connections, that establishment backing.
And because it was so personality-driven, and maybe because the party structure was weak, the campaigning got nasty. Really personal.
Yeah, I read about that. Jackson getting called a military chieftain, like he was some kind of dictator in waiting.
Right. Trying to paint him as dangerous, too authoritarian. And Adams, he got labeled aloof, elitist, out of touch with the common man.
And Clay, even though he was the compromiser, his opponents called him slick, maybe untrustworthy.
Exactly. It feels very proto-modern in a way. The role of partisan newspapers especially.
Yeah, different papers pushing different candidates, attacking the rivals. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It really does. An early, maybe cruder version of the campaign media we see now.
So all this campaigning, all this division, what happened when the votes actually came in, December 1824?
Well, the outcome was indecisive. That's the key. No candidate got the required majority in the Electoral College.
Who got what?
Jackson actually led. He had 99 electoral votes, but needed more for a majority.
Okay.
Adams was second with 84, then Crawford with 41, and Clay trailed with 37.
So Jackson had the most votes, popular and electoral, but not enough to win outright.
Correct. And that triggered a constitutional provision.
The election goes to the House of Representatives.
Exactly. The 12th Amendment says the House decides, but only from the top 3 finishers.
Top 3. So
Yeah.
Jackson, Adams, and Crawford were in, but Clay.
Clay was out. Despite being Speaker of the House, he wasn't eligible to be chosen by the House.
But as Speaker, he still had a ton of influence, didn't he?
Immense influence, and this is where it gets really dramatic and deeply controversial.
This is the corrupt bargain.
This is the corrupt bargain. So Clay holds significant sway. He apparently really disliked Jackson personally, found him unsuitable.
Okay.
And politically, Clay's American system, those tariffs, internal improvements, lined up much better with Adams's views than with Jackson's.
So Clay, even though he couldn't win, could basically play kingmaker.
That's exactly what happened. He threw his support, and likely the votes he controlled, behind John Quincy Adams.
And Adams won the vote in the House.
Adams won the vote in the House and became president. But the story doesn't stop there.
Right, because what happened next looked suspicious.
Very suspicious to many. Shortly after Adams took office, he appointed Henry Clay as his Secretary of State.
Which was a huge job back then, seen as the stepping stone to the presidency itself.
Precisely. So, the sequence of events, Clay supports Adams, Adams wins, Adams appoints Clay to a top cabinet post, just screamed backroom deal to Jackson and his supporters.
They felt robbed.
Completely. They immediately labeled it a corrupt bargain, a quid pro quo. Clay support traded for the Secretary of State position, subverting the will of the people since Jackson had won the popular vote.
And that accusation stuck, didn't it? It haunted Adams and Clay.
Oh, absolutely. It became this massive political rallying cry for the Jacksonians. It fueled Jackson's outrage, his supporters' outrage, and really set the stage for the next election in 1828. It fundamentally damaged trust for a lot of people.
So the immediate result was Adams as president, but under this cloud of controversy, what about the longer-term fallout? This election seems like it changed things fundamentally.
It absolutely did. Huge long-term consequences. First, it just shattered that illusion of one-party rule, the era of good feelings. It was over.
Right. The Democratic Republicans basically split apart.
Exactly. The election exposed those deep divisions and new political groups started forming. Jackson's followers coalesced, eventually becoming the Democratic Party we know today.
The oldest active party, right?
Right, it's the one. And on the other side, Adams and Clay led the National Republicans, which later morphed into the Whig Party. So the modern two-party system really has its roots right here.
Wow. And what about the way people voted? Did it change anything there?
Big time. Jackson's loss, even though he'd won the most votes, really energized ordinary voters, especially those who felt the system was rigged against the popular will. In the years between 1824 and 1828, many states actually changed their laws, getting rid of property requirements for voting.
So more white men could vote.
Yes, suffrage expanded significantly for white males. And that led to this huge surge in voter turnout in 1828, which propelled Jackson to a decisive victory that time around. It was a boost for, well, what we call popular democracy.
And it also highlights something still relevant today, doesn't it? The Electoral College versus the popular vote.
Absolutely. 1824 is a classic, maybe the starkest early example that winning the most individual votes doesn't guarantee you the presidency in the U.S. system. That disconnect is something we still grapple with.
So when you look back, 1824 wasn't just some weird historical footnote. You called it a political earthquake.
I think that fits. It really did mark the end of an older political era and the beginning of a new one defined by, yes, more democracy, but also much sharper political divisions and organized parties.
A truly pivotal moment. It redrew the political map.
For sure. The 1824 election is just a powerful reminder that American democracy wasn't, born fully formed. Its evolution has been messy, contested, and full of these critical turning points that still echo today.
It really makes you think. Considering those deep sectional tensions back then, the intense focus on the candidates' personalities, what parts of that 1824 election do you think resonate most strongly with the political challenges and, well, the debates we're having in America right now?
That's a really interesting question to ponder.
definitely something to think about. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us into such a fascinating and consequential election.